Well, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today with HealthRecon and Dr. Ruben to discuss the FDA final rule on LDTs. Dr. Ruben, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your credentials and qualifications?
Sure. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Thank you, William. Thank you, HealthRecon. I'm Ruben Bonilla Guerrero. I'm a physician by training. I am a laboratory director. I'm also the CEO and founder of Genetica Consulting. I have formal training in experimental pathology with focus on infectious diseases, clinical pharmacology with focus on pharmacogenomics and vaccine development, and in clinical genetics, focusing in molecular biology and biochemical genetics, perfectly board certified in the different fields. I am the current laboratory director for clinical biochemical genetics at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, and the CEO and founder and chief medical officer for Genetica Consulting. That's me in a nutshell. All right.
Fantastic. Shall we get started then?
Let's do it.
All right. Away we go.
All right. So there have been many beautiful presentations from many people speaking about the FDA ruling and have been able to break down the ruling in many different ways, from the legal point of view, from the technical point of view, from the combinatory point of view of those areas, what are the operational components, the financial components, and there are many other webinars that can talk about that, and we can talk about any of those topics, and it will take us hours because every laboratory is unique. Every laboratory will be impacted differently. What is common and it stays the same, and I like this image that I actually use from our friends of another organization, is that the ruling is very clear. It's divided into 5 stages, and it will impact every laboratory. Starting next year, we get stage 1, which is medical device reporting. If you follow CAP or are already ISO 13485, if you are CAP a member and your laboratory is CAP accredited and follow all their procedures, you should be already doing this. The only thing you haven't done is submit to the FDA, to submit to anyone. Now you have to submit that to the FDA. The FDA has its own application, its own software that you can submit things correctly. To do this, every step, every stage has different specific items that you need to identify. The level of risk for your assay, whether it qualifies or not for that, based on the technical components, based on when it was offered, and you need to work with either your QA specialist or consultant or an organization that will help you with that. Stage number 2, registration and listing and labeling. That's when you register your assay to make sure that everybody, FDA knows what it is, how is it done, performance characteristics, as well as labeling. Labeling is key, and that's where there's going to be a lot of problems for a lot of laboratories, because this is precisely saying what the assay does, what it doesn't do, based on facts about the technical capabilities of the assay and the application of the assay. What is it for? How does it work? What it can diagnose, what it cannot diagnose, what are the technical limitations, what are the clinical limitations? So the labeling needs to be similar to those that are in devices, because the FDA does consider IVDs to be medical devices. And that's where there's going to be a lot of back and forward. There are plenty of examples on the FDA website of many devices, even FDA-approved tests, that one can look to see if there's any comparison there. Quality systems requirement, that goes a little bit deeper, stage 3, which is all the way back to how the assay was designed. How is it validated? Does it meet the requirements that the FDA needs? Moving on to stage 4 and 5, which are the ones that are the most challenging, and all the processes that are happening, all the legal processes that are happening are trying to prevent. It's doing a pre-market review of the assay before it goes live. That means that you submit a full packet to the FDA to see if they say, yes, this is okay to go live or not. The pre-market review for stage 5 is different than 4. 5 is a full approval. And this has many implications, financial implications, regulatory implications, all the way from designing and validation. And it has one caveat that is very well embedded in the legislation and the ruling. Let's say that we all have an assay for an infectious disease panel. if for, let's say, respiratory panel, and there is one laboratory that gets the FDA full approval, it automatically invalidates all the assays that are not approved, and everybody has to use that test. So that's the biggest caveat of the ruling, and it's a big one. So there is a lot of fight over that one, and that's one of the pushes by the regulatory organization or the professional organizations that are having litigation on the FDA. So that's a summary of how it works. Now, if you will move to the next slide, William, please.
Yes, sir.
All right, this is let's do a reality check. And I'm not, William knows, everybody knows, I'm not one to sugarcoat it. So this is where we are with here. FDA considers IVDs, in vitro diagnostics, medical devices. FDA considers LDTs to be an IVD. Therefore, that is the rationale. There's no going back. The ruling was implemented on May 6th of this year. The FDA does not grandfather. Do not kid yourself that there is grandfathering. There is no such thing as grandfathering with the FDA. What they do, and people interpret as grandfathering, is they do enforcement discretion. Any assay that has been in the market up to May 6th or before May 6th of this year, they use enforcement discretion, which means that they look the other way until they don't. That's it. That's until they do not. That's what it is. They let you have the assay. You still need to comply with the stage 1 and 2. You don't need to do potentially stage 3. You are exempt of a stage 3 and 4 and 5. And that can say at any point, now everybody has to comply. So that is what is enforcement discretion. At any time, they can require those stages to be used. So it's not grandfathering. There's no such thing as grandfathering with the FDA. Any assay that is available or is available to the market as of May 6th or after, all phases apply. There are few exceptions on med needs, and that's a very, very unique situation that needs to be addressed, that has many components. What test, what technology, what is it for, where is the test located, what's the population impacted, and such. Perform and use within a healthcare system. If a lab belongs to a hospital that is part of the healthcare system within the same tax entity, that's another exemption. If the test was New York approved before May 6th or gets New York approved before November of 2027, then you don't need to do stage 3 and 4. This is why everybody who is in this webinar that knows me, I always push for New York approval, and I get a lot of pushback. I don't have clients in New York. Well, first, it opens the door for New York clients, because New York requires that every resident of New York needs to be tested by a lab that is approved by New York. That's one. And the other benefit, it's this one, the FDA exception of 3 and 4, phases 3 and 4. That is something that I knew a long time ago that I was going to use a third-party regulatory organization of quality for this particular ruling. It's been known for a long time. This is why I've always pushed it. Plus, it's the best quality standard there is in the United States. So it's actually, to me, not it's not an option for any lab. To me, you should get your assays validated up to New York approval. So for these instances, for those two, only phase 1 and 2 apply. Now, there are some exceptions, for full exception for this entire ruling, which is tests that have 1976 type tests used by law enforcement, HLA testing for transplant, Veteran Affairs System, and Department of Defense, and some non-molecular anti-sera tests for rare disorders, including as well as RBC antigen testing. So red blood cells antigen testing. Those are specific tests that are exempt from the entire ruling. FDA approves IVDs, in vitro diagnostic tests, are exempt for phase 3 and 4, unless you modify them. And modifications could be something as simple as using a reagent that is not in the kit that you buy, using a different test tube that you want. It's a different collection, using a different instrument. potentially changing the analytics of how you report, how you analyze the data. So changes to a test can be many different things. So that's why when you buy, if you use an FDA approved IVD, you have to use it and validate it as it is. You cannot modify it. If you modify it, falls off the FDA approval. There are other more complicated potential exception circumstances that you need to consult your QA or your consulting advisor or regulatory advisor that you may use. And that is very unique, but I can tell you that for most of the laboratories associated with the individuals that potentially are attending this webinar, this won't apply. This won't apply. Most of the laboratories, and I can confidently say that probably more than 95% of the laboratories that have a relationship with Williams organization, myself, and even HRC are going to be fully impacted by this. And there's an additional factor, cost. Submitting a phase 3 and 4 costs money. In addition to that, there are annual maintenance fees that you need to pay per test. That's why there are large organizations that are opposing this, but at the same time, there are some large organizations with plenty of New York approved tests that are not opposing this, that actually favor it. So there's a battle, there's a fight in both sides of the aisle for this particular ruling. We can move to the next one, William. As you can see, this webinar is not a how to do things, but let's check where we are with this so nobody's caught by surprise. There's no such thing as, oh, this is going to fall off, it's going to disappear, it's not going to happen. That is not true. So far, it's on. The FDA ruling is in place. What can the new president-elect do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There's no way that even by executive order can be eliminated. It doesn't work that way. The ACLA, CAP, AMP lawsuits are still standing, but they're not final. In fact, there was a ruling right now, there was a partial ruling in favor of the FDA, but still allowed to go on. So that's where several appeals will happen, and the ultimate result will be based on the summary judgment that happens at the end. The appeal will potentially, if it depends on who's favorite, then the appeals will happen. And that's where potentially the new administration can play a role, but not by producing a executive decision or such, but by introducing new legislation. And you all know how legislation works. It's glacier pace, extremely slow. So do not assume in any way that the lawsuits will prevail. Do not assume that that we have the winning formula to eliminate this. While all this happen, phase or stage 1, that's a typo right there. My bad. Stage 1, phase 1, however you want to call it, it's around the corner. It's May 6th of 2025. I do not expect any. You can change it a little bit there. I do not expect any final progress that will potentially eliminate it completely before it's stage 2. I hope I'm wrong. If I am wrong, excellent. Everybody should be happy. But based on how this works, and there are other similar FDA rulings that have happened for other areas that are not this, it takes way too long. So year 1 is already here. Year 2, it's going to be sooner than we think. The new administration has other priorities over this, way more important issues than this overall. So it's going to be very, very difficult that that it doesn't get implemented for sure by May of this year, and potentially 2025 and potentially May of 2026. So don't wait on ACT and get your laboratory ready for phase 1 and phase 2. We can go to the next one. So what happens if we are out of compliance? Well, the FDA is already preparing letters and is using terminology such as unvalidated, unverified, unsafe, design control system failures, as well as CAPA systems inadequacies. So they're already preparing letters to send to laboratories that are compliant of phase one. So they're getting ready to start issuing documentation for those labs that do not comply with phase one. So FDA has all the CLIA license numbers. And for every laboratory that is not reporting as of May 6th of next year, you're going to get a letter of not compliant. And it potentially, we don't know the consequences, but the consequences could be substantial civil penalties, a restriction of test offering. They could tell you cannot offer the test until you comply. They could impose a fine. Of course, that may have an impact because everything is public. Potentially could have an impact of the laboratory reputation and damage it, and potentially not allowing the test to be run and having some serious financial implications on the laboratory. So again, this webinar is not in any way of the instructions of the manual of how to do this, but to an eye-opening, because I am not a lawyer, I am not a regulatory officer, but I am a laboratory director, and I know how this works, and I know how this needs to happen correctly. Plus, in addition, most people that I've seen giving webinars about this, they're not as straightforward as I'm just telling you. They actually, work around words and try to make everything relatively easy and for you to open your eyes. No, I'm just telling you the way things are. I don't want any laboratory to be surprised and act too late for something that it's relatively easy to implement. Is it a lot of work? Yes. Is it difficult? No. It's just a lot of work that needs to be done. A lot of investigational work in the beginning, put everything in place to comply with the stage one, even the stage two, actually, is not difficult. It's just a lot of work to do, even for labs with a few tests, because every test and every laboratory is different. Can we move to the next slide, please? All right. If that wasn't enough, CLIA, CMS, has new laboratory director requirements as of December 28 of this year, both for MDs, DOs, PhDs, and doctors and clinical laboratory scientists. Masters as well. You need certification, specific number of CME hours. On-site requirements are changing. There's not any more full remote directors. Experience requirements will change. Now they need to be field test specific. So just having a high complexity laboratory testing exam, and you're going to direct a laboratory that does infectious diseases and you have never done infectious diseases before, that doesn't work anymore. You have to have field and test specific experience. CMS does grandfather current directors. So if you are a director of a lab as of December 28th of this year, nothing changed. But if you change director or a new director, somebody qualifies to be a new director, these new rules apply. And you can find all this at the CMS website. So two major things are coming this year that will impact laboratory operations. And this, if nothing changes, will be the biggest modifier that we see in the laboratory industry, because it impacts everybody, not just the laboratories alone. Everybody in the entire industry. Well, with that, we can move to the next slide, William.
Excellent.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, we are Genetic Consulting Services, subject matter experts organization. We offer laboratory consulting, management, reporting results, but we deliver a partnership. We work with your laboratory as being part of the laboratory, support all your efforts. And if you have any questions or want to know about more what we do, including the regulatory components, that is my email. And feel free to contact me, and we can have a session to talk about what we provide. We can go to the next one. And thank you to our friends for HealthRecon Connect for providing the platform to provide these webinars for everybody. This is the information where you can get the contact them for any questions regarding the services that they provide. And with that, thank you, everybody.
So I did want to also open the floor for questions. It looks like I've got an allow to talk button, which I would be happy to use. Just text me that you'd like to engage with asking some questions. Or you can just text them. Or not text them, chat them. Does anybody have any questions? If not, I've got a few questions of my own. Let's see. Webinar, can you see message? I'm not seeing any questions, so let's see. Making sure I'm looking at the right chat thing. Webinar chat, me to Seth, okay. And let's see. To everyone, let's see. Hello, chat. Okay, let's see, is anybody there? All right, say that went to everywhere, so I'm looking at the right chat. All right, so, okay, I had a couple of questions for you. Sometimes I've been asked, what is, I thought I heard someone in chat. I think you were talking, yeah. What are 1976 type tests? Is that like blood tests and stuff like that, or tests that were there before 1976, or what does that mean?
Literally that, tests that have the technology that have been used from that time. And that would be something as manual cytogenetics components.
Like pap smears would be then have been there, right?
1976, some potential clinical chemistry that requires manual intervention. So yes, that is related to that year's technology. Yes. Based on that definition, most of the laboratories that you and I know that use HRC and potentially, yours and our services, I don't know any lab that has something like that. Some very few laboratories offer that. Most of those laboratories are pathology laboratories or large pathology laboratories that use those. Those would be a specific test. They're test specific, not laboratory specific. So you could have a lab that has 1/4 of their tests being 1976 style technology. So those are not impacted. And then the rest, modern technology or automated technology. Now, if a test is manual, there is some room for potential exception. However, if you automate the assay, then it falls off the exception. So this is why every single test and lab is uniquely impacted by this. So while everybody is impacted by the phases, every lab is uniquely impacted by it and needs to analyze and assess what they offer, how they offer it, how is it done, how is it reported, to evaluate the risk assessment for that. It's all about what's the clinical risk impact of a test to classify them in the proper category. So,
hey Renuka, I've gotten a text from thank you for giving me that text that our chat is disabled. Oh, maybe it's the Q&A I need to look. There we go. I just don't know how to use my own system. It's got Q&A, so good. All right, but I do have a question that we'll put out here first. Is there any expectation that the Chevron decision will affect the FDA rule?
In theory, yes. The Chevron should help with the appeals based on the potential limitation or by how far the reach of a regulatory agency is. So that's the potential impact of it. Is it guaranteed? No. Is it guaranteed? No. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I have talked to a lot of them, and that is the thing. Does it open the door? Yes. Is it going to do something? Well, I think the losses are capitalizing on including that in their content. Is it a guarantee that it will change? No. But it should be used for that, for sure. Yes.
Let me know if you have any follow-up to that. We can also put that in. But in the meantime, there was another question. The question reads, will Congress or the Senate be able to overturn this?
Will be able, it's more of a, first, will they do it? Will they go? That's one. will be able potentially, but what I know, what I've heard from talking to other to legal professionals, is not about overturning this. It's about potentially providing new legislation about it. There's no way to remove it just like done. For that to happen, somebody will have to file an injunction, and nobody has done that yet. So,
and that is the reason why I had been discussing this with Ruben and the impact on, well, I mean, we make our living off of serving labs, and if labs aren't going to be here, that's a problem. And what had come up a number of times in conversations I had with Ruben and with some of the labs I work with was, oh, this isn't a big deal. We don't need to worry about it. Trump's going to come in and it's all going to go away. And so this was not intended to be a webinar on what you need to do or how you need to do it, but more of a webinar orientated on an owner of a lab should know that this isn't going away. It isn't going to be gone no matter what. There might be some changes to it or modifications to it over time. But what's happening this next year that he just got done talking about, you got to do that, or hopefully you're already doing it, right? But
if it goes away, so okay, let me put it this way: could it go away before May of next year, May 6th of next year? Is there a mechanism? Potentially, but for that to happen, everything would have to align perfectly, and we're not even close to that on anything to happen. So because of that, phase 1 will be implemented. Now we go back to the same. Is there enough time to prevent phase 2? Same thing. Things need to align perfectly for that to happen. And same thing for phase 3 and 4. So is there a chance that this could be stopped? Yes. Is it guaranteed? No. It's all about timing. While all those proceedings is still happening, there's nothing that guarantees that phase 1 won't happen, phase stage, however you want to call it, won't happen. So as a laboratory owner, I would not risk it. I would not risk it at all. Worst thing that happened, you implement phase 1 and then you are free of it if things change. Same thing with phase 2. What everybody wants to prevent is to get to 4 and 5. Those are the big ones. Those are the ones that would reshape the industry as we know it.
Question outside of, well, you know what? I'm going to put that one to the end. Let's see here. This is a good question. Asking for basically a summarization again of the stages a lab will be exempt from if they become New York certified. And I believe that was on...
So if it's not full exemption. If your lab has, remember that New York is not your approval overall. The first phase is you need to submit a test to get the lab and the test approved. Don't go there. Don't put it on the next one. The next one. So once the lab is inspected and the test that you submit to get the lab inspected approved, then that test is exempt of phase 4 and 5. 3, 4, and 5. That's it. Phase 1 and 2 still apply to it. There is a window of opportunity to get a currently in the market available test or potentially a new test approved by New York before November of November, not May, November of 2027. I put May there, November of 2027. I put May because it's the way that it was originally ruled, but it's until November, but it's 2027. If you get a test approved by then you're good for phases 4 and 5. That's it. This is why, for those who want to get that done, time is running out. New York, it's very slow because they are very thorough. And they were expecting, everybody was talking about, well, they're going to get flooded with a lot of applications and such. Well, they're not, because people think this will go away. People think that, oh, this is not going to happen. I don't need to worry about putting together the extra expense for a New York level validation and go for it. Well, here we are, and it's not going away, and that time frame is reducing. So I'm telling you, that is the circumstances. If you have a test that went to the market on the market as after May 6th, and it's not New York approved by 2027, you'll have to take it down. That's what it says. You'll have to take it down in 27. It's that simple. That simple. And I haven't heard any other webinar that says that. I don't know if they don't, I don't know why, but that's the rule. That's how it works. So.
Hey, I have a question of my own real quick. So is it then the equivalent of if you were to get New York approval before November 2027, that would mean it's equivalent, basically that's the equivalent of being FDA approved then and being exempt from phase 3 and 4?
In practicality, yes. In officially, no, you still don't have an FDA approved test. You're just exempt of phases, and that's it.
We're exempt from the discretion enforcement.
Exactly. You will not fall under enforcement discretion, but will still have to comply with phase 1 and 2. This is why it's very unique, because every question I'm trying to address it in a very general way, but it's very lab and test specific. And that's what we need to, you need to work with your QA specialist or your regulatory officer if you have one, or engage an organization that does all this for laboratories. I mean, GCS does that, but for the labs that we work with, they are doing this correctly, and they are going for New York as well. However, I have had labs that work or have worked with us that they're not fond of New York and they don't want to do it at all. They still think that this is going to go away, and not even complying with phase stage 1. So that's going to hit them like a brick, because May 2025 is going to happen faster than we think. I read something regarding the rumor is that Congress is not willing to fund this. Congress doesn't need to fund this. So there's nothing to fund. The FDA will obtain funds for this. They don't need anything for phase 1 and 2. That's all electronic. They already have all the systems. Phase 3 and 4, 5 potentially will require some funding. Where are they going to get it? Submissions. Submissions are not cheap. They range from $25,000 up to a few hundred for tests. So it's not cheap. This is where the financial impact to laboratories will be huge. Thinking about paying $25,000 for submission and potentially a year for each test to maintain. If you have 10 tests right there, that's a substantial amount of money for any laboratory. So
there's a question right after that one, a little bit longer one.
Let me read it first. If you had an LDT in place. All right, again, first, there's no grandfathering. That means you're asking, does it still fall under enforcement discretion? Well, it depends.
You might want to summarize the question because nobody else has seen it though, right? Yeah.
So it says if you have a test that was prior to May 6 in the market, basically that it's validated using open array, and you want to change the same panel using probes and primers instead, it's still grandfather. Okay, so this is a change in technology. That's a change in technology. So you are changing the way that you analyze the same components to produce similar results. So this is why it's test-specific and lab-specific. For this particular laboratory, that change will modify substantially the LDT because you have to revalidate the entire test. So that would be a new validation, and the validation will make it a new test. So in that particular component, if you were to say, I'm using open array, I'm just modifying adding more pathogens or more components to that same open array, you're using the same technology. But an open array to primers and probes, that's a completely different technology, or vice versa. Similar going from open array to NGS or NGS to open array, that's technology transfer, technology change. So that requires a full new validation. So, and that will require it to be fully impact by all stages. Now, if you change technology and validate up to New York and hurry up to get everything done to get the lab and the test New York approved before 27, then it's good.
But to be clear then, if we do have an LDT that was marketed before May 6th, I still have to do stage 1 and 2, but I might not have to do stage 3 and 4.
But again, that's you for right now. You don't have to do, if it was marketed before May 6th of this year, you only need to do 1, 2, and potentially 3. 4 and 5, you don't. That's the enforcement discretion. Until
they could change that until they don't, right?
At any time. They could say, now everybody needs it. Well, your enforcement discretion, people confusing it as a grandfathering, is gone. So that's up to them. They're just being relatively benevolent by having enforcement discretion, because they could say no enforcement discretion. That means full impact for every current or new test.
So
that's just them being merciful, if you want to call it that way.
Okay. And I think we've got everybody's. There is a question about how much per test for New York to get validation.
It's not again, New York is very similar to the FDA. There's not a substantial cost for the application. I think that's minimal. I think the application alone is like a couple of thousand or something like that, or less. The laboratory director needs to have the credentials. What it costs is the validation itself. And of course, it's going to vary depending on the test. It's not the same thing validating an infectious disease panel using qPCR, open array, or whatever you want, but that validating a germline test, call it whatever you want it, cancer, pharmacogenomics, whatever, using an open array, than validating the same tests using NGS. It's all test-specific tests, including what are you testing, how are you testing. You need to meet the New York standards for validation, which is a combination of the type of experiments and the number of experiments and how the data is gathered and analyzed to meet their requirements. It's not much different than what MolDX requires for a technical assessment, but bigger, a bit bigger. Every time that I see a test that was validated with, 5, 10 specimens, it scares me. That should not ever happen. Ever happen. CLIA cap, no way. And that's one of the items that FDA is using for unsafe tests. You don't have enough data points to establish the performance characteristics of the assay to be correct, to be accurate, to be precise, to be reliable. That's the thing. That's what New York's prevents by requiring a lot more validation samples. And I mean a substantial number of validation samples compared to that. So,
well, then it looks like we've kind of answered all the questions. I thought maybe I would try to just run through this and summarize it.
There was one about CMS. I think we said well to the end. Can the experience in the current lab qualify as experience for the new lab director requirements?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yep.
Of course. If you have experience, if you are a lab director today and are direct laboratory that does infectious diseases, cancer genetics, pharmacogenomics, yes, that qualifies based on the category to be director for another laboratory, of course. But if you are bringing such tests up and you're hiring a new lab director, that new lab director needs to have test-specific, field-specific experience, aka in this case, infectious germline testing specific, not pharmacogenomics specific, germline testing specific experience and such. So oncology would be the same. That would be somatic DNA experience and such. So it has to be field specific, not test specific, field specific. Okay.
Excellent.
So that's how it works. Let's see. There's something else pop up here. You can see Rumor Congress. New York. No, I think we're good. So
excellent. Thank you so much, Ruben. Really appreciate that. I hope
there's
everybody's listening.
there are many other webinars, and I encourage all of you to attend all of them. This was more of an awareness conversation. It's not a how to do or a specific how to do things. If you want to know how to do things in a more detailed way, for CAP members, CAP accredited laboratories, CAP does have beautiful webinars about this, and they are still going on. FDA has beautiful webinars about this, very informative, and there are plenty of other law firms and regulatory providing organizations that have webinars that are a lot more specific than this one. Again, for me, my goal here is to bring awareness to make sure that everybody knows that this is not waiting for anybody, and we should not be waiting on things to change before we implement what is required to comply with phase 1 and phase 2. If everything changes, great. But so far, nothing has changed. So that's it. Thank you very much.
And we will send out links. This will be posted on YouTube relatively quickly. We'll send out the link to all the attendees. So thank you.